Peter. Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuel. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we are doing our Monday morning on the East Coast of the United States, Monday morning live stream. It's very exciting. There's a lot of news items that we can talk about. The least interesting of them, I think, is the fact that
the least interesting.
Least interesting. We can start off from the bottom. There you go.
This is a unique podcast, everyone.
Yes, a unique podcast. We start with the least interesting, and President Biden is putting forward his plans to reform the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Which is quite extraordinary because, you know, he's a lame duck president. He has less than 6 months left in office. Anything like a Supreme Court reform, that's a major legislative initiative, very hard to get through in the best of times, but he's going ahead with it. Now, what's interesting is how many civil servants and government officials are being recruited to do this, which has no hope whatever of passing. I mean, imagine the absolute waste of public.
For something of this magnitude, George, it has to be bipartisan.
Yeah, of course it does.
Something of this magnitude. I mean, this is changing the Constitution, essentially. I mean, by design, everyone, changing the American Constitution is, well, it's probably better to start thinking about building condominiums on Mars, okay? And that
I think so. It's very, yeah. I can't even remember what was the last.
I know we did this yesterday. We should have looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was they lowered the voting age to 18, but I can't remember whether that was the last one or there was anything else after that. But that was about 1970, so that's already more than 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But
this is just showing that there's a pulse still in the administration. I think it's embarrassing. I don't think anyone that wants to continue, that's been part of this Biden trajectory, they're going to change teams, and they want to get on with Harris and maybe salvage their careers after this horrific presidency. Okay, so I mean, maybe there'll be just waste of do a white paper study and all this kind of stuff, and and waste taxpayer money. To change have the Supreme Court changed in a fundamental way. It has to be bipartisan. Yes. It has to almost be apolitical, even. Okay. I mean, lowering the voting age. I mean, that was bipartisan. Everyone thought that was bipartisan. If you can go die in Vietnam, you should be able to vote. That's a pretty fair proposition. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, the Democrats would like to lower it even further because they're convinced that the younger the person, it doesn't say much for the Democrats. The more ignorant the person, the more likely is to vote for the Democrats.
They'll, across the board, they'd lower it to 9. Okay.
Exactly. That's right. Okay. That's right. So that's that nice kind of waste of public resources. But we also had the election yesterday in Venezuela, and what do we have? What a shock! Fraud! This is a fraud, stolen election.
The Venezuelan opposition is someone is watching our podcast because we know this playbook. Okay, there's an election, you don't like it, you say fraud. Get the fraud. What is it? The Organization of American States to come in and say it's a fraud. Okay,
it's a fraud. Exactly.
Because it's the Biden administration, and maybe they haven't woken up yet. They'll later today, mark our words, fraud. Okay,
fraud.
We will recognize the election by the end of the close the business. Mark my words.
Yeah, no question. The problem that they have is that they've already got a lot of sanctions in place against Venezuela. So there's not a lot more that they can do. I mean, of course, they can, impose additional sanctions. You can always do that. But short of actual invasion, there's not a great deal that you can do. So all you can try and do is try to use your CIA assets and cause an insurrection and violence, and then that could trigger even more agitation and then even more kind of pressure. Well, we need to intervene. We've got to do something. Blah blah. Other than that, I mean, if then there's not a great deal that they can do. But there's no question, as you say, throughout the day, we're going to hear more and more rumblings from the administration, from the usual blowhards, the Marco Rubios, who's an expert on Latin America, that this is all a complete stolen election.
I've never understood, why should the United States care who governs in Venezuela?
No.
Why should the United States care about elections in other countries?
No.
Why?
No.
Why? Okay. Maybe, why they're not? There's some kind of inversion going on here. They're not interested in their own domestic democracy, but they're overwhelmingly, feverishly overtaken by democracy outside of the United States. So Kamala Harris is going to be made the nominee of the Democratic Party without earning one vote. Not one. Exactly. Maduro says, "Hey, how can I get in that action?"
That's right. You're absolutely right. Exactly. Without earning one vote. In fact, those candidates, I mean, we don't leave aside Biden, but even those who actually ran in the Democratic primaries, Dean Phillips, that woman Williamson, I mean, they at least earned some votes.
Yeah.
They don't look in. I mean, they actually went to the trouble of
Bobby Kennedy
name and nomination and everything, and they earned some votes. They campaigned, they spent money, they had to raise money, and they don't get a look in. So that's nice work, that kind of democracy. But of course, what we do know is that the election here in November will be marred by as many if not more blemishes than any election anywhere. I mean, it's like, you're going to go through what all of the things that we went through in 2020, like votes arriving after the deadline, after the election day being counted.
I have an idea.
Verifications.
I have an idea. I think the BRICS, when they're having their annual big meeting, the big tent meeting here in Kazan in Russia, I think that they should suggest, or maybe even demand that there be a BRICS election observer contingent sent to the United States. Every 50 states. All 50.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The BRICS may save this election. Okay. I think BRICS is an organization of countries that have voluntarily come together for a stated end. It has no international standing at all, like NATO. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So they should volunteer, approach the United Nations and say, give us some blue helmets or whatever helmets, okay, and we will go to every major congressional, every congressional district in the United States and observe the election, because Americans don't know how it works anymore. Okay.
Yeah,
they know how to cheat, but they don't know how the democratic process works anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely.
I say BRICS 2024 American elections. Bring it on.
That's right. That's right. The OSCE is, of course, a total fraud, because I remember after the 2020 election, they immediately, I think within 24 hours, said, "Yeah, free and fair." I mean, we had so many problems that emerged, within hours of that election. And the OSCE, free and fair, no problem. We
don't know, George, are they still counting?
Are
they still counting ballots in Arizona? I know they had a problem there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
they still
Arizona, Georgia, they're still, exactly. So it is very funny that the United States, which really is, the elections are a complete joke. I mean, the idea that you can have elections in which you basically don't even ask for ID. And we have clear evidence, well, there's overwhelming evidence. We have polling evidence that illegals, people who are not citizens of the United States, are voting in elections. I mean, this is something that people confess to in polls. There's a recent poll, the Rasmussen, poll, a very large, substantial people they polled were not citizens and they had voted in elections. I mean, it's ridiculous because there's simply there's no measure, there's no verification in the United States.
Should we be surprised? If you have no borders, then you have no citizenship. Should we be surprised?
That's right. That's right. So they're going to come back. Now, in the case of Venezuela, his margin, Maduro's margin, according to at least the official results, it seems to be fairly substantial. 7 points, that's usually a landslide. Now, even if you say, oh, fraud, it's going to be hard to make up 7 points. Now, of course, they're going to say, big win for the opposition, but it does lack plausibility. They've always done this in Belarus. Every time there's an election in Belarus, they say, fraud, stolen election. But it's a bit difficult to claim, in Belarus because the victory was just so overwhelming. Well, how are you going to believe that, one of these Tikhanovskaya or whatever her name is, so she really won.
Well, we have the Gaggle, what should we call corollary? Okay, all I care about, did the candidate win 50% plus one vote? And then other than that, it's a moot conversation. Right. Okay. Right. So did Maduro get 50% plus one vote?
Right.
Well, then he won. If he did, he won. Okay. Right. You can talk about margins all you want. Right. Okay. But I mean, the opposition in Venezuela has a lot in common with Democrats in the United States. Is that they start out with lawfare even before one vote is cast. Right. They're going to contest the election. Okay?
Yes.
They're going to go to the courts. Okay.
That's right.
And in the case of Venezuela, they look for outside support. Okay.
Yes.
They want a country like the United States, punish my country, Venezuela. Okay. This is what the opposition is all about. Okay.
That's right.
That's what they're all about. Okay.
That's it. That's exactly, and that's what they want. They want to punish my country, and then we're going to do what they tried to do with creating this fake Guaido. It was only like Guaido is the real president. So we're going to say, we recognize the legitimate ruler.
Who knew that in Florida, some skinny tall guy with a backpack, he's actually the president of Venezuela.
The real president.
One thing that we have to point out to everybody. George is talking about people, illegals voting in the United States. Well, the American foreign policy is one of the reasons for that, is that the punishing sanctions on Venezuela has forced people to leave out of desperation. How many Venezuelans, I'm going to put this straight here, Venezuela, we got to take the family and move. Now, where do we go? Let's go to Guatemala. Nah, I don't think so. Okay. Costa Rica? I don't know. They have some problems too. Mexico? Oh, no way. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
What my point is here is that with this ridiculous sanctions regime against Venezuela, it forces people to leave. The average Venezuelan guy, he can't make a living, wants to take his family to it. I understand why he wants to go to the United States. I absolutely understand it. Okay. And then they go. And then, it puts enormous pressure on resources, infrastructure. And then there are political parties like the Democrats saying, oh, I can use these people here. And it's bipartisan, everybody. It's bipartisan. Okay. So now we use these people as cannon fodder. Okay. If you stop this ridiculous sanctions regime, you wouldn't have that kind of push on immigration. A lot of people are from Venezuela. And again, my heart goes out to them. If, I need to take care of my family. It's my responsibility. I'm going to go where I think it can happen.
Right. No, that's right. So we're going to have additional elections in Georgia. Now, the United States and the EU have been eyeing Georgia for many years, and they have a government there that is just really annoying them.
And Georgia can say, You and I have been at the forefront of this.
Right.
Check how many podcasts we've made. We're Georgia watchers, okay?
That's right.
Post-Soviet Georgia
Right.
watchers.
Right. That's right. And so we have this election. I think it's in September, and already, the fraud at the polls. Those pamphlets and posters are already prepared. They're already done so the moment that the election is over and the Georgia Dream party was declared the winner, then we will have the claim that this election was stolen, and that, of course, they're going to apply all of the pressure and then some against Georgia. They're already applying pressure against Georgia over their version of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Now this is going to be serious pressure. You stole the election, Putin. Putin stole the election on behalf of the Georgia Dream Party.
But see that narrative will work for people that have been subject to Russiagate for almost 10 years now. Okay.
Right.
Sorry, kind of a footnote to that. It's kind of problematic because nobody in Georgia is pro-Russia.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There's no political party. There's no political base for that whatsoever. I mean, they'll try to sell it, of course. Okay. And again, those that haven't seen the past podcasts, let's back up here. George mentioned FARA. Okay. There is a FARA law in Georgia, and it's very common practice for countries, particularly small countries that are subject to foreign influence, and they had adopted it. Russia has one too. Russia actually copied the American one from 1938. Okay. Now, this is the perversion of democracy and the rules-based order. What is happening in Georgia is this law about transparency. You'll never hear that word transparency, but that's what it's about. Was it 20%, George?
Yeah, that's right, 20%. You get if it's 20, it's 20% and above owned by foreign principals. Yeah, that's right.
And so the U.S. and the EU are up in arms over a small country that is promoting transparency.
That's right. Yeah, the transparency. The same U.S. and EU that doesn't stop screaming about Russia, the pervasiveness of Russian influence within Europe and the United States. Imagine, you've imposed all these sanctions, you've banned all the Russian information outlet, but nonetheless, everywhere there is Russia. So the EU, which is constantly complaining about how there's Russian meddling in every aspect of European life, is indignant about Georgia that actually says, we don't really want foreign principles dictating our domestic policy. How dare you? How dare you raise issues about foreign meddling in your internal affairs?
There's good meddling and there's bad meddling.
Okay?
That's part of the rules-based order. We're trying to explain this very, very opaque concept here. Hopefully with the end of the Biden administration, it may go away, but it's not impossible. Maybe George and I will talk about it. It's not impossible Harris can make it into the White House. I didn't say elected, but I said get into the White House. Okay.
I definitely do not think it's impossible. So one other thing I wanted to talk about is our friend Viktor Orban. He gave again an interesting speech over the weekend, and now let's see if I can. All right, let's see. I don't know if I can do this. Let's see if you can see it.
Okay, as you're pulling up there, yes, I think everyone is commenting on George, you got your biannual haircut, and congratulations.
The biannual, that's very good. Can you see it, Peter?
Nope, I can't see anything here. Maybe.
All right, you can't see it. Okay, well that's not really working then. Let's then go back and see if we can get this sorted out. It's a little hard on Rumble, but let's.
I'm afraid to punch any buttons here. I mean, I can see you, I can hear you. I'm very happy about that. Okay.
Yes, yeah, no, that's the good part. That's exactly. Let's see, yeah. Let's try something else, and then if we don't, then that will just give up, as per usual. Let's see. All right, let's. Yeah. It's so weird that that sometimes it works and then other
George,
times
you're not alone, George. I've watched enough of the other podcasts, and the same thing happens. Okay. I can remember when I was growing up, there was the digital watches became very popular. And the Timex was really the rage, and because it was really cheap, almost everyone could afford it.
Yeah, I remember that.
They had these whole series of commercials promoting Timex, and it showed how tough and rugged and durable it was. And then they had one, which I think was one of the greatest commercials ever made. They had this like wooden stump, and they had an elephant stomp on it, stomping, and then the elephant's foot comes off, and they see this, and they just totally smash it into little pieces. And the character in the commercial doing the narration, he said, "Well, it worked during rehearsal."
Yeah, that's exactly. It worked on the way here. But all right, I'll read out a bit since if you can't see it, and then here he's talking. He talks at great length, without any notes, but what he says here, I mean, I'll just read a bit of it out. Yeah, he says here that European policymaking has collapsed. Europe has given up defending its own interests. All that Europe is doing today is unconditionally following the foreign policy line of the US Democrats, even at the cost of its own self-destruction. The sanctions we have imposed are damaging fundamental European interests. They are driving up energy prices and making the European economy uncompetitive. We let the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline go unchallenged. Germany itself let an act of terrorism against its own property, which was obviously carried out under US direction, go unchallenged. And we are not saying a word about it. We are not investigating it. We do not want to clarify it. We do not want to raise it in a legal context. In the same way, we failed to do the right thing in the case of the phone tapping of Angela Merkel, which was carried out with the assistance of Denmark. So this is nothing but an act of submission. And then he goes on since the European policymaking has collapsed since the beginning of the war because the core of the European power system was the Paris-Berlin axis. It was the core and it was the axis. Since the war broke out, a different center and a different axis of power has been established. The Berlin-Paris axis no longer exists, or if it does, it has become irrelevant and liable to be bypassed. The new power center and axis comprises London, Warsaw, Kiev, the Baltics, and the Scandinavians.
Yep.
Yeah. When, to the astonishment of Hungarians, one sees the German chancellor announcing he's only sending helmets to the war, and then a week later he announces that he's in fact sending weapons, do not think that the man has lost his mind. Then when the same German chancellor announces that there may be sanctions, but that they must not cover energy, and then 2 weeks later, he himself is at the head of the sanctions policy, do not think that the man has lost his mind. On the contrary, he's very much in his right mind. He's well aware that the Americans and the liberal opinion-forming vehicles they influence, universities, think tanks, research institutes, the media, are using public opinion to punish Franco-German policy that is not in line with American interests. And then says that Changing the center of power in Europe and bypassing the Franco-German axis is not a new idea. The idea existed before, in fact, being the old Polish plan to solve the problem of Poland being squeezed between a huge German state and a huge Russian state by making Poland the #1 American base in Europe. And then he really attacks Poland. And this, as a first sight, outpacing the Germans seems to be a fantasy idea. But if you look at the dynamics of the development of Germany and Central Europe, of Poland, it does not seem so impossible, especially if in the meantime, Germany is dismantling its own world-class industry. This strategy caused Poland to give up cooperation with the Visegrad Four. The Visegrad Four meant something different. Visegrad Four meant that we recognize that there is a strong Germany and there's a strong Russia, and working with the Central European states, we create a third entity between the two. The Poles have backed out of this, and instead of the Visegrad Four strategy of accepting the Franco-German axis, they have embarked on the alternative strategy of eliminating the Franco-German axis. Anyway, the speech is well worth reading it in detail, because he talks a great deal about that. But it's a pretty stark what he's saying here, which is basically, we used to have the Franco-German axis. That used to be really at the heart of Europe, where, you know, even back in the days of the Iraq invasion, when Chirac and Schroeder came out against the American plan to invade Iraq, joined incidentally by Russia and China. But now they've been completely marginalized, and you have the alternative axis, Poland, the Baltics, joined by the UK and the Scandinavians. I mean, they did the most rabid of the Russophobes, and that's caused a deep weakening of Europe, because, you know, France and Germany are supposedly the strongest powers in Europe,
and the EU is no longer that vehicle, a center of power. It's NATO. NATO is taken over, okay, because that includes the United States.
Right.
And this is the Sikorsky's a wet dream.
Right.
This is what these people have wanted, but very much to the detriment of Europe as a whole. And newsflash, everyone, as a reaction to that, I don't know what official in Poland it was. I saw it just seconds before we started. But a Polish official said that Hungary should be thrown out of the EU and NATO. Okay.
Yes. That. Yes, that's kind of put paid.
No debate, no discussion. Just throw them out.
Just throw them out. Yeah. The Polish-Hungarian alliance is a little frayed. The great historic friendship between the two nations, you know, is a little frayed. It was already deteriorating in the previous government, the kind of conservative Law and Justice Party, but at least they had a kind of a conservative social agenda that was at least in line with Orban's conservative social agenda. So, you know, however much they disagreed on the policy towards Russia, they at least agreed on that. But now there's with this Tusk government in power, they don't have any agreement, and I think that's why it's just simply, you know, in this absolute hatred towards one another.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you allow an outside power far, far away, like the United States, to determine all of your, particularly your security and defense policies. And what's really interesting about Orban is that, you know, Hungary still is part of NATO and still part of the European Union. I guess they can't make sure every time an email goes out, they can't say, "Oh, delete the Hungarians." The Hungarians know what's going on in the halls of power, and Orban's the only one that's telling everyone. Did you know what they're really thinking about? You know what they're really saying? He's our only conduit.
He is. The interesting thing is with Orban is that he's very popular in Hungary. I mean, they've been trying to get him out for years and years, but he has a knack of winning elections and winning them comfortably, which is very unusual. I mean, he's a kind of a conservative, nationalist, populist that they don't do that well elsewhere, or at least they don't do well enough to win elections. He does, and so he can say all these things, in the comfortable knowledge that basically the opposition, at least for the foreseeable future, will not be able to come up with a candidate who can seriously challenge him. So that's why he can talk like this. And each of these speeches is actually getting more and more vehement. And this is, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time he's explicitly said the Americans blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and the contemptible Germans basically just sat on their hands and did and said nothing about it. I don't think he's ever said that before.
But he said what everybody knows. It's amazing. Everybody knows this. This is not a surprise. It's not breaking news. Everybody knows it.
That's right. That's right. Of course, because I mean, there was so much evidence pointing towards it, and the very fact that no one's investigating it. That that's it. We just don't have the evidence. We just can't get our crack investigators just don't seem to be able to find any clues.
I guess we'll never know. One of the mysteries.
But it's also interesting in that he's also identified that this whole warlike policy, he's linked it to the Democrats. And I think that's very sophisticated, because he's saying the problem with Europe today, this whole the EU-NATO bloc, is that they've kind of tied their fate to the Democratic Party, and they haven't really figured out a kind of plan B. Well, what if the Democrats aren't going to be in power next year? They just, and he said this in his speech, so it's a long speech. He's saying, well, what are you going to do then? Because if there's a change in policy in Washington, you are going to be in a lot of trouble, because basically what Trump's going to do is just going to, dump this policy on you and say, well, if you want to wage this war against Russia, go right ahead, but we're out of it. And at that point, the Europeans are going to have to, clamber out of it. They can't do it without the United States. And then, as he says,
but they will,
like a bloody fool.
But they will. If the U.S. pulls out, there'll be resolutions very quickly. Okay,
that's right.
Because again, this is the tragedy and danger of NATO, because the U.S. will take on the responsibility for everything, and you just go along with it. Well, you're saddled with the responsibility. You just start acting in a very, very different way. Okay. Well, the vitriol and all of this, it's not. Sometimes I think, George, the vitriol is not directed towards Russia. It is just to pay homage to Washington Center. That's what it is, to show that we're on board. The Russians don't care what Ursula von der Leyen says. Borrell and what's Kaya? She's going to be coming in. I mean, she's a complete incompetent. Okay, do you think they're going to listen to what she says? Do you think anybody in the European Union is going to listen to what she says? But the people in Washington will be listening to her, and that's her entire message. Being the High Commissioner of Foreign Policy, never gotten the title right, of foreign policy for the EU.
I think EU High Representative.
High Representative. It's kind of Roman Empire stuff.
Yeah.
But all it is it's directed to Washington. It's not to even the people of the European Union. Right.
No, that's exactly right. But the thing is that, the Europeans, this kind of European leadership, because they've completely abandoned any sense of a European foreign policy, any real sense of a European identity, they've basically mortgaged themselves off to the United States. But by doing so, they essentially did kind of, hook themselves to the Democrats. Because the Democrats are, well, we're the Atlanticists, we're the internationalists, we're the ones who believe American responsibility and, for global affairs. And the Europeans buy into that and think, oh, Republicans, they're the isolationists, there's always, has been going on for decades, this fear of Republican isolationism.
But George is absolutely right. So you could ask, and this is something that I wish we could talk to Orban about, because I think it would be interesting. George, I'm sure you can arrange it. But Orban's right, because let's say Trump comes back. The Democrats control the deep state, okay? Right. So they're just going to keep doing what they're going to do. Now, that'll be a crisis maybe within the United States, right. But there is this continuity. You know, we had that little Vindman guy, you know, the interagency consensus. Well, that includes the European Union, okay? That's not just talking about the American intelligence community. Right. It is Western intelligence.
That's right. That's it. That is exactly right. Anyway, let's take a look at see any questions. Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor, and so here we look at our locals page, and let's see. So Cynthia, it's very good to see you. Thank you so much for your generosity, Cynthia. So Cynthia says, it seems like the GOP is trying hard to capture male voters, since the Dems seem to have a pretty tight lock on female voters, which would explain why Trump picked a male as his VP. Sadly, though, this reinforces the notion that politics are driven by identity politics instead of actual policy issues, which is very disheartening. This means that in terms of policy, domestic or foreign, there's not a dime's worth of difference between Dems and Republicans. I mean, I think that's correct. The only thing that I would just simply say about the male and the female is that you know, you have to sort of differentiate the sort of the unmarried females and the married females. The married females tend to vote for you know, Republican just as you know, as much as men do. The unmarried females, you know, they overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats. That's the big big fall down on the Republicans. Huge. I mean, you know, single unmarried women overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats. So that skewers that statistics as to why Republicans do so poorly among women.
Well, I think, you know, it's solid analysis, but picking J.D. Vance also, there's a class issue there, and I really wish the Republicans would push that a whole lot more. And this is something George and I have just lamented for, you know, for ages now, is that the Republicans fall into the trap of this identity politics. It's all nonsense, you know. People are sick and tired of it, but the left has this knack of calling the tune, and Republicans, which I have nothing to do with, by the way, but you know, conservatives can fall into the trap of tap dancing to a tune that is not of their own, and that really infuriates me. I'm not. George and I did a podcast on this yesterday, you know, and all the left-wing stuff nonsense, you know. They have their own echo chamber, and they're all talking to themselves and convincing themselves. But I think there's going to be a backlash against it. This, you know, Kamala Harris, she's a genius. We didn't know it. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. It doesn't mean she can't win. You know, I'm very, George and I have been very hesitant, you know, to take a victory lap. Okay, because I don't think that's a really good idea.
No, I don't think so at all. And incidentally, I don't think that. You know, even when Biden was still in the race, I didn't think that it was a done deal for Trump either. I mean, I think that it was going to be a very tight battle. The thing with the Republicans, and you know, Trump kind of in 2016, he's masterfully got away from identity politics. He just basically said, you know, like, you know, hey. Like, you know, putting it simply, hey, what have you got to lose? I'm going to make things better for you. He didn't really do that in 2020 and got punished for it. He started playing this game of, you know, slicing and dicing the electorate, trying to offer things to black voters, to Hispanic voters, and so on. And that undercut.
he played by their playbook, George.
Exactly, that's a mistake. Now we'll see what he does. I mean, but if he tries to do that thing again, oh, we're going to do all these things for women, and I'm going to hire all these women in my administration. If he goes down that path, I think he's going to fail, because that's always the kiss of death for Republicans when they try to be like the Democrats, because they can never outbid the Democrats. That's what I'm going to hire a black woman.
What you need to do, it's really, really simple. Close the border, well-paid jobs. I'm done.
Yeah, I agree.
That's it.
Yeah.
Everything else will fall into place.
That's right. And as Cynthia goes on, I also don't think it's appropriate at all for first ladies to get actively involved in their husband's politics. The worst examples of this being Hillary, Michelle, and Dr. Jill. In fact, I think there ought to be some law against it. To me, they should stick to doing only apolitical things like reading to kids and beautifying our public parks. But I am curious as to why Democratic first ladies tend to get involved in such highly political endeavors, while GOP first ladies don't. I think that's a very good question. I think that, because when you think of Republican first ladies, I mean, they have their kind of pet issues, like, say, Nancy Reagan. So Nancy Reagan, the thing about drugs, but it's kind of non-political. I mean, she just wanted to discourage people from doing drugs, and she did it in a fairly non-political way, just say no, and so on. And of course, you had Pat Nixon, again, did the first lady thing, opening.
And I don't even know what Mimi Eisenhower looks like.
No, I don't either. Now, Gerald Ford's wife was, of course, a notorious alcoholic, but she started the whole the Betty Ford center, so because she was just an embarrassment to her husband because of how alcoholism. But Hillary Clinton was something else, because not only was she politically involved, but remember, Bill appointed her as the head of the task force to overturn the American healthcare system. Of course, she did a terrible job of it, ensured that Bill Clinton lost the 1994 midterms, because when people found out about what she was planning, that was that. But she insisted on that. I mean, I guess it's something to do with their marriage, that she could afford to insist to her husband, hey, you better give me a big job, otherwise, who knows? But that was something completely beyond anything that any first lady has ever done. That, hey, I'm going to be responsible for overhauling the American healthcare system.
Hillary Clinton never achieved any success ever on anything.
No, that's right. I can't remember with George W. Bush's wife. I seem to remember, didn't she sort of encourage reading? Wasn't that her thing? Yeah.
She was encouraging her husband to read, but anyway.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I think sometimes it can be very positive. I mean, obviously the benchmark is Eleanor Roosevelt, and it was very interesting, their dynamic. They didn't have a real marriage. That was over a long time before he even got into the White House. Okay. Franklin had his appetite as well.
Yes.
But didn't end up being an amazing partnership. And because he was infirmed, and this is well documented, that Eleanor was his eyes and ears, and traveling around the country during the Great Depression and during the Second World War. I mean, obviously Roosevelt went on foreign diplomatic missions, Potsdam, Tehran, etc. But it was Eleanor Roosevelt, and she went out and saw the troops, and she went to the hospitals, and she was revered. Meeting the First Lady was like meeting the President of the United States. Okay,
that's
and
true.
Then you had Bess Truman came in next, and she said, "I don't want anything to do with this. I'm moving back." They moved. Harry Truman lived alone most of the time in the White House. His family left.
Yeah,
they went back to Missouri. Okay.
Yeah.
And so Harry Truman was a very lonely man in the White House. Okay? But it was the first house he actually owned because when he was married to Bess, he lived in Bess's house. Okay.
Yeah.
Harry Truman's story is quite fascinating, but I have a special reference for Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay. I think that she played a very positive role when the country needed it. Okay.
Right. No, that's right. Of course. And she was the first U.S. Permanent representative at the United Nations. So she was the first Nikki Haley, so to speak. So
and one difference, because we had in Warm Springs, Georgia, where Franklin, they had the like what was called the summer White House, I think it was called, because of his polio. He liked the springs down there, and Eleanor. I know she visited, but she was very hesitant to go there because of the Jim Crow. She just found it really appalling. And it was one of the big differences in their marriage, because Franklin said, "Oh, this is how I get elected. They're good old boys and all of that." And that was a very interesting touch point for in that marriage and in their politics, because Franklin said, "No, these people vote for me, okay?" And she just says this is morally wrong. Very interesting.
Anyway, we have a question here from Iskander Magnus, who is a medical expert. He's the Gaggles medical expert, but it's a non-medical question. He asks, Peter, who has the time and who has the clocks in the Israel-Hamas conflict?
Hamas has both. Okay. There's no real solution there. It is so depressing. That's why I firmly believe, and evidence is coming to the surface to prove my point, is that was one of the reasons why Netanyahu went to the United States, was number one, to show the Israeli people that he has the Americans in tow, and number two, to sell a conflict against Hezbollah. And George and I talked about this yesterday. That's heating up on the border there. So the axis of resistance, they have the clocks and they have the time. You have to put this into perspective. This is a 20-year plan that's being played out. This is a step-by-step process by the resistance. And what they've done is, at least for the time being, neutralize Israel's ability to go up the escalation ladder. That Iranian attack directly on Israel was a big victory for Israel in the West. No, it wasn't. On points, Iran won that one. So clocks and time is against Israel.
Yeah, I don't really think that. I mean, ultimately, Israel has the muscle, and Israel can therefore escalate to whatever level it desires, given, it believes that its survival is at stake, and then basically they think we are entitled to do
why it's a bad situation, George.
We are entitled to do anything we want because our survival is at stake. And so, ultimately they will do anything that they need to do in order to ensure their survival. So that's why I think it's when you wage these wars against Israel, Israel will come out the winner. Now, the
winner
is, and again, is something different, but Israel will prevail. In just like when we talk about Russia and Ukraine, I mean, whatever setbacks or anything that happened to Russia, you can say Russia just has the overwhelming strength. Russia cannot lose. And I'd say the same about Israel. Israel has the overwhelming strength. It cannot lose. Israel can suffer huge casualties and huge setbacks, but Israel ultimately cannot lose.
Israel cannot suffer huge losses and huge setbacks. It's a tiny country, okay? Fundamentally, George, I don't disagree with you. We've talked about this so many times. But what does winning mean in that way? And that is very difficult to contemplate. I mean, an entire region incinerated. Who won?
Well, I think that's true. Yeah.
Okay. But what I'm just saying, everyone, is that it's just not looking good. I mean, failure in Gaza means they need to expand the war, and that is very dangerous for everyone involved. And one of the things, George and I have talked about this since October 7th, is that unfortunately there are many people, neocons in the United States, obviously the Zionists in Israel. This is all an opportunity. Okay, this isn't a disaster. This is an opportunity, and that means to solve all of your problems all at one time. Now that is, fantasy thinking. Okay, things never go as planned. Never. Okay. And if they think they can take out the axis of resistance of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias all at once, that's fantasy thinking.
Right. No, that without question, that is fantasy. But I'd also say that, in the case of Iran and Hezbollah, they are, they're going out of their way to avoid getting into a war with Israel. And clear, I mean, Hezbollah, even after this attack in the Golan Heights, I mean, Hezbollah immediately said we were not responsible, and have said, they've given their own version of what happened. That this was basically the Israelis themselves did it. It was their anti-rocket missile that hit the soccer field. They say, no, we never target civilian targets. That's already an explanation. Now Israel can reject it, but it also shows the extent to which Hezbollah really wants to avoid any kind of a war. And that's like with Iran as well. Iran does not want to get into a war with
exactly,
Israel.
George. Who else doesn't want a conflict? Iran doesn't want a conflict. Hezbollah doesn't want to come. The United States doesn't want, at least at this point in time. Now, having Israel parlay with Hezbollah, that is a different story that's developing. But to pull in Iran into this, no.
Right, that's right. Anyway, Iskander Magnus says, George, any more questions about Biden's mental status? Well, see, because Iskander had given us a very detailed explanation about his Biden's neurological deterioration, because Iskander has specialized medical knowledge. I don't know that I have any more questions. I mean, Peter, do you have any questions about Biden's mental status?
On my program, I'm going to touch a little bit on this tomorrow. But and one of the questions I sent out to my guests is that, will we actually hear much about Biden for the next 6 months? I don't think so.
We started off talking about his plans, and I think he's going to come up with more of these plans drastic reform of the government and whatever. I mean, even pie in the sky nonsense.
Even that bizarre letter that he sent out on social media, there are no pictures of him signing it, everyone. No. It's not an official stationery. Some have questioned the signature. He wants to cure cancer before he leaves. Well, good. I'm on board. Let's cure cancer before you leave office. Okay. Some people say that we're being cruel to an old man. Well, the joke has been on us. This is the way it's been for the entire presidency of Joe Biden. I just wonder who's going to have the kiss and tell book. 1 year into Trump's administration, and how many books were written about it? Huh? How many?
Right.
How many? Who's going to come out and say, "Well, this is what really happened"? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
And so many people know about it and won't say a word.
No, that's right. I don't know whether you saw that that video that was it went around with Kamala Harris, in which she's basically in her own voice saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a DEI hire. I'm a completely incompetent. I don't know anything." And what that showed is that through AI, you can do this. You can actually send out a video of somebody. It sounds like your voice saying, "Well, I'm a complete idiot and a total moron. I have no idea about anything. That's why I get to be the president of the United States." So that's why when Biden now comes out and gives a speech, how the hell do we know that this is really Biden? I mean, it sounds like him, kind of looks like him, but basically this could all be AI generated. So we really don't even know at this stage whether Biden, is compos mentis, or whether he's even alive. So he can send out, make all these speeches and statements, but we have no idea.
It's not impossible, because Woodrow Wilson, he suffered a catastrophic stroke in his second term.
Right.
And I always can forget his wife's name. Do you remember his wife's name?
Is it?
But
Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
she essentially ran the U.S. government. I mean, she was the gatekeeper to her husband, and she's the one saying he agrees to this. He can't talk, but I know what he thinks. Okay, but that was before social media. That was before television. I mean, it was that was easy to do then, but because of the level of technology of the day,
right?
Well,
No,
it's it goes back. A template of this can be the Trump attempted assassination. I mean, if you can't get a straight answer from the powers that be, then you're going to get 1,000,001 conspiracy theories. I don't blame for people saying this story doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe this is what this means. That's what happened when you're lied to, when you're deceived. This is what happens. And,
yes,
George and I, we keep as far away from conspiracies as possible. I mean, Peter, do you think this is? I don't have the evidence. I don't know. I can just tell you, I don't believe the official story. That's what I can tell you.
No, I quite agree. I'm not buying the official story, but at the very least, we can certainly say that the Secret Service did a stand down. I mean, it was clearly a stand down. They were, the Trump people had asked for proper security precautions. They were denied. The Biden administration had denied all the requests that they had made for additional security. And then the behavior of the Secret Service on that day was just, basic. They couldn't care less about Trump. And then, of course, you can say that 2 days after this this failed attempt, or is suddenly I think a week after, Biden steps down. So you kind of you start putting things together, and you say, like, once one plan has failed, another plan goes into effect, which is Biden is bundled out of the Oval Office very unceremoniously, and a new plan is put in place, which is somebody else is going to take the Democratic nominations of Biden. So again, we don't know. We can't put these things together, but I think there's enough there to say there is something very interesting about the timeline of these events.
Yep. And there's no reason to believe that we're going to learn anything factual, transparently, for at least until the election.
Yes.
Course.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. And then, so we have. Steve K9 says the idea that there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats is absolutely wrong at the local level. At least mine, the split is extreme. At the national level, there is more similarity. I think that's right. I mean, I think there are differences. Domestic, I think the where they say they're pretty much identical. I think it's when it comes to foreign policy.
Right, war.
Defense. That's where they're just always singing from the same hymn.
Yeah, I mean, we can play with some words here. I mean, I agree on a local level, domestic, as we're using the term here. Yeah, absolutely can be some big differences here. But once you go up the power chain, you get domesticated. Right. Okay, and that's why we see this rift. And it was on full display during the RNC, which I don't think got enough commentary, or it was kind of smoothed over. So what was Nikki Haley doing there? What was Mike Pompeo doing there? This for me, that really soured the whole event. Right. I mean, these people are still hanging around, and it's not impossible that they'll get high positions in the administration. And then we have a repeat of Trump 1.0. That didn't bode well. That's why I'm very discouraged, to be honest with you.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, I think that's to give people the benefit of the doubt, you can say that Trump at this stage, he just wants to get over the finish line, and he says, well, look, I want everybody in the tent. I want I don't want to have any falling out with anyone. I don't want to have, want people rushing to the media and attacking me. So let's be on board, and then we'll discuss all this after the election. That makes sense. But we we don't know. And then I think it's reasonable, that you could say, well, look, is there really any serious evidence that Trump is I don't know, Trump is a non-interventionist, that he's some kind of a Ron Paul-like figure when it comes to foreign policy? There's some evidence, but there's a lot of evidence going the other way, that his heart isn't really in it, because all of the plans that he made during his first term to withdraw from all these interventions, to not to start new wars and all this thing, I mean, that was pretty, very dubious. I mean, if you look at, let's say, his policy towards Iran, well, he exacerbated the poor relations between the United States and Iran. And while he didn't start a war, he could have done. I mean, the assassination of General Soleimani, that was a very provocative step. That could have easily led to an absolute crisis. So, I don't think it's right at all to give him this credit that, oh, he really wanted to end these wars. He wanted to somehow, retreat from all these commitments. Well, that the record is not really convincing. Yeah, but
it can be even more banal, George, is that, of course, George is making reference to that very expensive drone that was shot down by the Iranians. And John Bolton is there, drooling over the possibility of a massive retaliation against Iran. But you could think of, Donald Trump sitting in his chair in the Oval Office. Well, what do I get out of this? I mean, how does this work for me? Okay, I know that my voters, on some level, have an absolute aversion to these wars. Why am I going to lead into one? And again, somebody like Trump, he doesn't think in geopolitical terms, but we can be, Bolton saying, we can destroy Iran, we can win. And I'm sure someone like Trump will say the obvious question: what does it mean to win? What does that mean? But if you can't explain it to me,
right? But Trump did assassinate General Soleimani.
Yes.
That was a step that was extremely dangerous. Like, could have been led to a complete and utter disaster. Now, Iran, behaved in a very restrained way. Iran is always very restrained in its policy, but nonetheless, it led to an Iranian attack on a U.S. military base. The U.S. just basically sat on its hands and didn't respond to that. So you could certainly say, well, okay, Trump was also restrained. He didn't escalate. But nonetheless, what was the reason for assassinating Soleimani? What was Soleimani doing that was harmful to the United States? I mean, he was fighting ISIS. ISIS was a big enemy.
ISIS feared Soleimani more than they feared anyone else.
Yeah. No, that's right. So that, I mean, I think ultimately you can say, well, we don't know which way Trump is going to go, because his record in office was a mixed bag. I mean, it's like, you have this, he tried to improve relations with Russia, but in such an feeble, half-hearted way that it was easily pushed aside by the deep state. And so in the end, he kind of was pursued a more anti-Russian policy than any administration prior to his. Biden's a different case, but I'm selling javelins to Ukraine, and I'm kicking out all these Russian.
He got rolled.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, let's go on. So we have DJ 53144. Thank you. The tip, he says, Alistair Crook said Hezbollah almost took down an F-35, had to withdraw. What have you heard? Did you hear anything about that?
Well, I'm still watching the interview. I had to interrupt it for this. Okay, but apparently, there was a Israeli jet that had violated Lebanese airspace. Nothing new in that, and it was fired upon, and it made a quick withdrawal and went back into Israeli airspace. So that's all we know at this point. Maybe since you and I have started talking 1 hour, 5 minutes ago, more information has come out. But that's.
But I also, I mean, I don't know what almost took down means. I mean, either you take it down or you don't take it down.
Well, apparently it was it was close enough that it was. They feared that they found themselves into some kind of net and reversed. I'm not a military person. Okay, so I don't. George asked a very valid question. What is it? A near miss? A quarter mile? 15 feet? I don't know.
Right. Anyway, Iskander says, Peter, in response to your question, elderly patients who develop a common cold or any minor infection develop delirium, a short period of confusion that is reversible. It can last days. In the patient with underlying Alzheimer's-related dementia, the delirium can last days to weeks or potentially be irreversible. I think that's Biden, is in the latter state. That is why they are hiding him. They are hoping he will come out of the delirium. Unfortunately, in many cases, delirium makes a point of decompensation in their dementia that is irreversible. I do not expect to see him much until November. They will hide him as his delirium is likely irreversible.
I have no medical expertise other than just observing people in my life. But one thing that I came out with from the get-go is that people in whatever condition Joe Biden is in, people don't get better. Okay,
no.
You can have a good day sometimes, but you don't get better.
No, that's right.
And I mean, for all of us that have seen that, it's so heartbreaking to watch that happen to someone lose their faculties. Okay, particularly someone you respected or admired, and you see them fall apart. It's really sad.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, but I never respected or admired Biden, so that's
what I mean.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the interesting thing is that when he did make his television appearance, he had this huge bruise on his jaw that remained unexplained. How did he get that bruise? I mean, we have to assume no one hit him. So did he have some kind of a terrible fall?
To the reports that he had a medical incident in Las Vegas, maybe.
Right, but what was the incident?
Probably fell down.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not for that. Anyway.
Yeah. What is this thing about Biden appearing taller? I've just seen memes of it. Does anybody know what that's about?
I've seen memes of that, and I like you. I didn't quite. I didn't follow through. Does he appear taller? But he's always been quite tall. I mean, he looks decrepit, but he's actually quite tall. Anyway, Iskander goes on. In regards to that Oval Office 10-minute speech, they likely sobered him up from the delirium with stimulants. Stimulants dilate the pupils. They had eye drops to constrict the pupils, giving the appearance of hyper-focused locus. Oh, that's good. The face is tanned to give the appearance of health, while the hands are slightly blue, reflecting the extent of his widespread illness. The overall appearance is unsettling, fake, because the mind sees contradictory elements in his body, constricted pupils, sick hands. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think he does look increasingly weird. I mean, he just doesn't look at all the way the way you just look even 2 or 3 years ago, I mean, it's like it's a completely different person. So you're probably right. They inject him with some drugs to do this, and then they have to inject him with some other drug to take away the effects of the first drug. So the end result is that it is a very strange appearance and a very strange.
They tried to do the same thing with Michael Jackson, and it didn't work out well. Okay.
No, that definitely not. Anyway, 60 Cents says, "Greetings, George and Peter and fellow Gagglers. I am guesstimating it will be about 8:15 a.m. in Silicon Valley." So he's one of our supporters from Silicon Valley, where it's extremely early. So 8:15 a.m. in Silicon Valley.
I get up at 5. Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't. Once you reach my comment, I'm sharing the following text message, which was sent to me unsolicited from a Washington, D.C. prefix phone number. "Hey, it's white dudes for Kamala Harris. We're getting ready to promote Kamala Harris this November, and we need your help." I unsubscribed, of course. Yeah, I mean, that sounds all very, very strange. The sort of white dudes for Kamala Harris. But I'm sure that this is all part of a kind of move to say, hey, yeah, she's really slap bang in the middle of the mainstream. White Americans will definitely identify with her middle class, middle of the road brand of politics.
No, we're white dudes for immigration control, well-paid jobs, and to stop all foreign wars. These two white dudes you see right now, we're for that. Has nothing to do with Kamala Harris.
That's right. That's it. And Iskander goes on, "The bruise on his face likely is from a fall." Yeah, dementia patients fall all the time and break bones. Very common. Yeah, I think that's right. Anyway, Judy Hotchkiss, thank you very much, Judy. Always good to hear from you. Thank you for your kindness. Judy says, "As early as 1919, Mrs. Woodrow Wilson was starting to take over." And then she offers a photograph. Here she is leaving the Versailles Conference with the U.S. commissioner at the conference, the Anglophile Colonel House. That's an interesting photo. Thank you so much for that. That's really good.
And that was his second wife. His first wife died when he was president. He married.
That's right. And then Iskander says, "I'm not sure if he's taller. Biden is taller, but he could be given special shoes to avoid falls, which is also common in the elderly." Okay, that's an interesting explanation. Anyway, let's see what is happening on YouTube, which is always very.
You're getting better at this, George. Like George is in.
Yeah, getting a little better, but this business of the screen sharing, it's still it's still a real pain. Anyway, let's see.
Magnetic shoes.
So this one, John Maychek says, "Really a treat having you live on YouTube and a Monday morning, no less." Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you so much. Peruco asks you, Peter, would you look into RFK Jr. Candidacy? And I will look into, I guess, would you support a RFK Jr. candidacy? I wouldn't have thought so.
It was hanging around with Rabbi Shmuley. I just shut myself off. I completely shut myself off from anything he had to say. I found it to be so shameful, so shameful. Yeah. I'm not on team genocide. Okay, that's it's any Republican, any Democrat that is supporting Netanyahu's genocidal acts in Gaza are not my friend, and I will not support anyone that supports that. Okay, I'm not on team, and that's a deal breaker for me. Sorry, just a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's very odd that he went down this path, because he starts off as this anti-war, anti-deep state, anti-surveillance, pro civil liberties, pro individual autonomy candidate. And so on the face of it, he sounded like an attractive figure. He'd be a kind of a successor to, say, Ron Paul. And then he went down this path, and it's very strange how someone who purports to be anti-war is so wholly on board with Israel. I don't get it. I don't understand the logic that led him.
I'm not even interested in trying to understand that. It was a deal breaker. It was over for me. That's it.
Yeah. James H says, hope you guys enjoyed the Olympic show the other day. Yeah, we recorded a podcast.
No, we out of respect for our valued viewers, we did not show any imagery. Okay.
No, we did not show any imagery from that.
I respect our viewers' values. Okay, real values.
Exactly. That's right. Yes, that's right.
They showed who they are. At least they did that for us. We know who they are. Okay, we know what they believe in, and we know how much they look down upon the rest of us. Okay.
That's right. James, I think he's being ironic here. He says Maduro has to go. I'm assuming he's
Assad to go.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely. I remember back in 2011, in the heyday of the Obama-Hillary Clinton foreign policy, I think they had no less than 4 leaders who had to go. There was Gaddafi must go, Assad must go. Then there was a guy in Yemen that was he had to go. I can't remember who. There was a 4th one who also had to go. But that's an all-time kind of record. Yeah, there's you've got 4 leaders, all of whom had to go. So yeah, there's no question that there's going to be a real drumbeat. Maduro has to go, and the OAS, they'll get a vote at the OAS saying, that basically, either Maduro has to go, or we will never recognize this election result. Alex Glann says, Kaya or Kamala, any difference?
Well, I think the political psychological DNA is probably quite similar. Okay, these are just trophies. They're just little glittering things they like to put in front of you. Okay,
right. Yeah.
Hey, Kamala Harris. Hey, kudos to you. I mean, it's amazing someone of such limited ability has made it so far. I mean, it's really an extraordinary thing. It's something to actually marvel.
It is, and it's somebody who kind of went from success to success. So in other words, she, she goes, wins an election to be San Francisco DA. Then she wins an election to be California Attorney General. Then she wins an election to be senator from California. Now, it's true that it's a one-party state, and so if you're the Democrat, then you're going to win. But nonetheless, there were people pushing her. I mean, after all, there are a lot of ambitious people everywhere. Why was she the one who was selected and pushed and promoted? Was somebody who has such limited abilities. I mean, somebody who basically is unable even to speak. You think, okay, well, people have been pushing you all this time. Surely you at least know how to deliver an address, give a speech. But she's not even able to do that. So then you think, well, why did people push her? What was it that they saw in her that made them so enthusiastic?
Yeah, that's what happened to meritocracy in America.
Yeah, yeah. So James says Orban would be a good guest on the Gaggle. Yeah, look, as Peter said,
yeah.
I will probably get him on. You know, I'll just put I'll put a call in to his office.
He's actually one of the few people I'd actually like to meet. Okay. I think because most politicians overwhelmingly are just frauds. Okay,
yeah.
I don't really have much interest in them. But the Tucker Carlson interview with Orban was really, really good. I really liked that a lot. A lot of authenticity. Okay, he's a politician. He's got his angles and all that, but he's upfront about it. I like that.
Right. No, he is, and I think there's an authenticity about him, but it's also extraordinarily smart. I mean, he's able to discourse on essentially complex issues, really, without any notes, and that's very impressive. And when you ask him a question, he stays on point. He doesn't go off on all sorts of tangents or whatever. So he's kind of an impressive figure.
Here's an interesting question. I've heard Harris's parents were both college professors at McGill University. How did she turn out to be so dumb? Well, I actually was a lecturer at the University of California, Davis for a couple of years. And what I found really remarkable is that a lot of these students, they had very successful parents. It could be in a wide variety of areas. But one thing that stood out about this pedigree is it was always the same question: what do I need to do? What do I need to do to get an A? Okay, and it's that kind of mechanical thinking. There was no interest in learning anything. There was no interest in thinking about something. It's how I go through the process. Okay, and it's basically I'll make up a number. It's $80,000 to get this diploma. So what do I have to do to get that diploma? Yeah. Okay, I think and so many people are like that. I mean, all of these Kaplan courses, cramming and all of that. That's not learning material. That's learning to have a process for a certain amount of time to deliver a result. And it's kind of like, when was the Treaty of Versailles? Well, it was in 1919. But that's just the date. How did we get there? What were the implications of it? It's like a benchmark. Knowing the date of something doesn't mean you know the significance of it. And I came across it over and over again.
Right. No, I think I mean, you're right, but I think it goes beyond just knowing the dates. I think it's definitely a mentality when you go into universities, like, well, you have to write essays, so so therefore you have to outline ideas and so on. So you kind of figure out what is it that the professor wants to read, what kind of ideas does he want to read, and then you do it, and then you learn how to do it, and that's how you get A's. There's no question that's a phenomenon. In her case, it's a little different because she didn't really go to any of the prestigious universities. I mean, she went to Howard University. And then she went to the Hastings College of Law. So it's not exactly like Obama or the Clintons, went to Yale. I mean, Obama went to Columbia and Harvard. Now, Obama does very much sound like the kind of figure who just kind of figured out, what his professors wanted him to say, because that's what he's like. When he's scripted, he's very good. When he doesn't have a script in front of him, he's all over the place. But she really didn't go to any of the prestigious colleges. Again, unlike Bill Clinton, unlike Hillary, unlike even the Bushes and so on, they all made sure they did all their punch their tickets at the elite colleges. So she, again, she went to all these other colleges, but she knew enough about California politics to just she gets hired after Hastings College Law. She gets hired by the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. How do you immediately, within 2 or 3 years, you're running to be the District Attorney of San Francisco? I mean, it's sort of kind of figuring out how you're supposed to be a good district attorney, you're already running to be the district attorney of San Francisco. It's a kind of a very interesting how this career put together.
If we look, I don't want to spend. I only want to spend a little bit of time on this. But if you look at all of the prosecutions of Trump, I mean, these are buffoons. I mean, these are buffoons.
They're buffoons. Yeah,
I mean,
no question.
It's just extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, I can think logically, and these people don't use logic. They use just their hatreds and passions and prejudices. Okay. That's what is terrifying, and that's why the West. It's that mentality that created the Olympic game opening in Paris.
I agree with you. When you look at the prosecutors in the Trump, think of Letitia James with the fraud and unable to list anyone who had been defrauded. Then you have the prosecutor was it Alvin Bragg with again where you come up with a crime that nobody can actually even understand. You can't even explain to them what the crime is. And then you have what was the name the one in Georgia
that fiasco.
God, the name escapes me with with exactly that fiasco. Basically, they're just ripping the government off and enjoying holidays all over the world on the government dime. These are people who are, as you say, they're just driven by all of their political ideological prejudices, and there's no legal.
You know what they are, George? They're mini Gorbachevs. Okay, right. That's what they know how to work the nomenclatura. They know how to game the system. You understand how it works, and that's how you move up. It has nothing to do with intelligence, because Gorbachev had none. Okay, and nothing to do about skill, because he had none. Okay, and then he suddenly made it onto the top. What do I do now? Because it's only driven by your resume. It's resume building. Okay. And you have someone like Joe Biden. If you take the list of the most mediocre senators in American history, he's pretty high on the list. Okay, a man of no vision, no intellectual curiosity, not at all. And he made it to the top. And now Kamala Harris has made it to the top.
Right. No, that's right. A very ambitious person. Got elected to the Senate at the age of 29, but then, with that tragedy struck almost immediately when he lost his wife and his daughter, that kind of forged a bond between him and the people of Delaware. From then on, he never had to worry about getting reelected. So it's like that was it. And so that's it. He was,
gave him plenty of time to count his money. Yeah.
Exactly. That's right. Anyway.
Well, I see we have some real interest in history here. Okay, wow. All right, while you're looking for a question, I got a question for our viewers.
Uh-huh.
I want to show of hands in the comments. Would you like George and I to host from time to time a roundtable of a group of people that you like? Just give me a thumbs up if you want to. We could do that. I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on George. Okay, he's swearing at me under his breath. But how about a roundtable? What do you guys think?
The Edith was the name of Wilson's.
You sure wasn't the first one or the second wife?
That's a good question. I
think that was the first wife.
Okay.
Make George work.
Um, um,
Buddy is woken up. Come on, Buddy.
Oh, that's very good of him to do that.
There's Buddy. Oh, sorry. And that means Apple will be here. Yes, he showed up. Okay. Chihuahuas are intensely jealous little beings. And so Buddy's like, well, what about me? What about me?
It says here, Tucker Carlson has become lucid about spiritual warfare destroying God's creations. President Trump has a strong affinity for Tucker Carlson. Do you think the assassination attempt near-death experience could make Trump receptive to such conversations with Tucker and other people of faith?
No.
You don't know? I don't think so.
You know, since the topic is brought up, because it's an interest, I'll take it from a different trajectory, that question. I think one of the things that's happened to a lot of conservative people is that we see what's going on around us in kind of a cosmic way. What do I mean by that? Well, why don't Boeing airplanes fly anymore? Why can't the Secret Service protect the president or former president? How in the world could there be an Olympic Games opening like that? You know, that was planned for years and millions of dollars. And I think that what, you know, I know what the question when it comes to this kind of spirituality, I look at it as kind of in cosmic terms, is that there's it's a lot bigger than just thinking rationally. There is a fundamental recognition that something very, very wrong is going on. You know, why is it, you know, it's impossible for my children to buy a house? They want to have children, but they can't afford it. Inflation damages me, but I'm told by the powers that be that, no, you don't understand. Inflation is just fine. I mean, there's so many layers of that. I mean, you can just take one thing and just, you know, brush it aside. But when everything, your senses is telling you one thing and you're being told another thing. This is why I think it's kind of like in a much broader understanding of what's happening to us, because I don't want to live out somebody else's narrative. This is that whole trans movement. I'm supposed to live out your fantasy. No, I'm not going to live out your fantasy. I think it's bizarre. I think it's disgusting. I think it's anti-human. No, I'm not going to play in your fantasy. But that's happening on on a mega scale. I have to participate in your fantasy because your fantasy doesn't damage you and your prospects. It obliterates the rest of us.
No, I think that's right. And I think that the issue of the sort of the spiritual aspect is, you know, I mean, it's acquired this salience because, you know, you people are finding that they are living in states where people really don't give a damn about them. They are seen as replaceable. You know, you can just simply, you know, bring people in and we can replace you. You don't really matter very much. And in a way, I mean, why do people have spiritual needs? Well, they have to find some meaning to their existence. You know, human existence is brief. And so you have to find some meaning as to, you know, you're thrown into the world and then it's over. And you have to find, well, what, you know, why do I bother? Why do I need to do anything? And so that's always been the challenge of religion and people's spiritual needs, is there has to be some explanation, some sense that they matter. and that they're part of some kind of a plan. Otherwise, it is, you know, a very brutal idea that you just come in and then you check out and it's over. So that's always been the spiritual need, and in a way, when you know, the people feel they don't really matter, that this country that they live in, you know, that doesn't give a damn about them. Their you know, political leaders don't give a damn about them. Then I think that really reinforces the terrible feelings of pain and anguish, and, you know, leads to all sorts of things like, you know, rampant drug addiction, alcoholism, suicide, all the phenomena that we have today.
Yeah, see, one of the outcomes of the Enlightenment, if we look at the French Revolution, is the aim, the goal of creating a civic religion that would replace any kind of spiritual connection or worldview. And it's been tried over and over again, and it always fails. Okay, so we have the French Revolution, which ended up gobbling up itself, and then we had a restoration that went back to very traditional, basic values. We had that in the Soviet Union, and the Russian people and its spiritual existence was tormented for 70 years, and once that came to an end, thank God. There was a revival of many things related to religiosity in the church, but this whole Western project of neoliberalism is still another attempt to create this kind of civic religion, and it's alienating because it doesn't fulfill needs. Okay,
no, I think
it fulfills needs of some people in power. Yes.
No, I think that's right, and I think what's particularly obnoxious about the neoliberalism is precisely that it's so anti-human. It tells people don't have children. So it extols you know, abortion. It even extols bringing your life to an end nice and early, you know, to save,
and narcissism.
Exactly, to save the state some money. It tells people, hey, don't eat meat, don't do anything to enjoy yourself, don't use fossil fuels, don't travel, live in smaller units. So it's a profoundly anti-human ideology. Plus, it tells you that, you know, you are replaceable because, hey, there are 7 billion people out there, all of whom would like to come over and work for half of what you get paid for. So it's a very unattractive. I mean, at least socialism, in its utopian form, and it was always utopian, say, well, this is going to be glorious. You know, where people are going to be, rivers are going to be flowing with lemonade, and, you know, we'll just be doing nothing. You know, we're going to be lying. Well, I mean, on a pleasant field and enjoying the countryside and the weather and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that was my travels in Eastern Europe in the 1980s. I learned that was probably the formative time in my life, because there was a lot of equality. I think that's fair to say, but that equality is most people were poor. Okay, I mean, people were not affluent. Okay, but there was a lot of equality, and there was accepted too. Okay, and when people found out, I mean, this is one of the when I studied the Solidarity movement in the 1980s, and you know, there was samizdat, and I mean, self-printing information, people passing it around clandestinely, and they would find out that some party leaders, they may have been living in a cement building like everybody else, but inside it was, you know, glittering with gold and all kinds of modern appliances and stuff like that. And that really was offensive, you know. He said, if I'm going to be poor, everyone else around me should be poor too. At least there was a solidarity in that.
Right. Okay. No, I think that's a good point, and I think that's, in a way, that's the capitalist deal, which is, yeah, there's inequality, but everyone's going to get rich. But that's the promise. You know, you have to then promise people, yeah, but you can get rich too. Yeah, so yeah, you may be poor now, but you know, this is capitalism. You know, it's a career open to talent. And
until it isn't.
Exactly. For a while it worked, but it, you know, it's kind of stopped working some time ago. I think, I mean, it had problems before the war. After the war, there was the period of economic expansion, and everyone was kind of, content from about 1945 through about 1972, because everyone was, hey, there was a recovery after the war, and people were getting richer. Ordinary people making more money than they'd imagined, and then suddenly it stopped. And then once it stopped, then the discontent that's always implicit within capitalism really manifested. So
the television series Mad Men is a really good reflection of that. Okay, because the characters that we focus on, almost all of the characters in Mad Men, they are products of the post-war era, and they reflect, and we see it in the series, reflect upon their parents, where they were extremely poor. They'd suffered during the Depression, and I really like the 1945 to 1972 because it's just about perfect. I agree. I mean, if you were to ask us independently, I think it would have said exactly the same thing as
John Mazier says, so America is ruled by dummies. I guess so. It's kind of an interesting issue. I mean, it's that we sort of say, we try to say good things about democracy. Oh, democracy, people, throw the bums out and so on. But the amazing thing is that we never do throw the bums out. They keep getting reelected. So however badly they perform, they keep getting reelected. So
what we get,
something badly is going wrong with democracy. It's like if you think of COVID and the people who gave us the lockdowns, and this terrible, terrible disaster, economic disaster, in every way that they inflicted through COVID, they all got reelected. They're all, hey, I'm back. So something badly is going wrong with democracy.
Well, I mean, the bums are thrown out, and then you get people of color. Then you get sexual diversity and all of that, but they all have the same ideology. It looks different, but it's the same message. And
right. Right. Yeah. But I mean, let's say, Biden. I mean, you get these people who were the real COVID enthusiasts, the lockdown enthusiasts. Got Biden in the United States. He wins. Then you got Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was even worse than the Tory government. He's worse than Johnson and others. I mean, he was a real fanatic about lockdowns, vaccines, and so on. He wins. I mean, it's like I mean, we had Blair. Blair kind of inflicted this terrible disaster on the UK with the invasions of Iraq, and so on. He wins election after election. So
that's part of this civic religion project that has a very long pedigree, but it doesn't solve any problems really. It's very self-serving for a very narrow elite, but it does create cults, and that's what we have. You have people have asked me about QAnon. I have no idea what that is. Still, George, do you know what? I don't know what that is. But I do know. I think it was Aaron Mate that came up with Blueanon. Now I know what Blueanon is. Okay, and it's very cultish. Okay, it's and so for those that are against any kind of religiosity, well, you've already seen it in a very secular format, and it's called Blueanon, and it's neoliberalism. That's one huge cult.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, Judy Hotchkiss says JD is a bit of a fundy. I'm assuming we're talking about JD Vance. Yeah. Here's a quote from him at the Quincy Institute reflecting that, quote, "We are the largest Christian majority country in the world, which means that a majority of citizens of this country think that their savior," and I count myself as a Christian, was born and died and resurrected in that narrow little strip of territory in the Mediterranean. That the idea that there's ever going to be an American foreign policy that doesn't care a lot about that slice of the world is preposterous. I mean, you can make that argument. However, it's that's maybe the origin of the religion more than 2,000 years ago. Very hard to say, well, we're going to determine our foreign policy decisions about what was going on here 2,000 years ago. I mean, is there any other part of the world when we make our decisions about what happened here 2,000 years ago? I think it's
well,
so,
I mean,
I can see the argument. I just don't think it's.
I can see the argument, but what does that have to do with the state of Israel? It has nothing to do with the state of Israel. It has to do with long attachment, but viewed through different lenses through history, about the origins of religions. Okay, I mean, when Constantinople fell and the Ottoman Empire took over Palestine, I mean, that was it for a very long time. Nobody cared in the West about, you could go visit the Holy Land. There were no more crusades and all of that. And all of a sudden, in 1948, it's all of a sudden again a germane piece of real estate. The Holy Land is not Israel.
No, I think it's right. I mean, if when thinks of Jews could go there. Jews were arriving in the Holy Land, but the state of Israel, the origin of the state of Israel, this modern state of Israel, is the Balfour Declaration, and the Balfour Declaration was enacted with a view to getting, British are very smart, the British, to get the Americans into the war. And they thought this is the way to get the Americans into the war, which is to make this promise of recreating the state of Israel. So that was that's 1917. So that's already, again, you talk about something happened 2,000 years ago, was that we will recreate the state of Israel, but it was a political reason. So it wasn't like, well, it's been there, for 2,000 years, and therefore, we have to sort of have some commitment to it. No, it was done by the British to say, well, we will recreate it, and then whether Balfour really believed that could be done, that was a different question. But that it was done for political reasons in order to get the United States into that war.
Okay, and the Holy Land and Zionism have nothing to do with one another. Okay, this is what people are doing is they're taking relatively recent history and projecting it backwards, which is ahistorical. Zionism is a settler colonial project sponsored and supported by the British. That's what it was. Okay, and to say that it has a pedigree before that is nonsense, absolute nonsense.
All right. So Iron Candy says communism is utopian, not socialism. Well, I don't know. I mean, Fourier, the great socialist thinker Fourier, is always.
See the book. I can see the book right now.
That's right. Fourier was the classic, the paradigm of utopian socialism, and was attacked by Karl Marx for his utopianism. So yeah, utopianism has always been implicit within socialism, and one has to say Marx was against it. He was never a utopian. Saint-Simon is also a utopian. So it's very much it's not just communism. It's at the heart of socialism. There's a lot of noise going on behind you, Peter.
Well, there's some inside baseball stuff. I have about 3 pairs of very old leather slippers, and this is what Apple loves to play with for hours on end. Now, why do I let him do that? Yes, he's chewing them up. He's slowly but surely he's demolishing them. But why do I let him do that? Because he's not chewing on my furniture, and he's not chewing on my shoes. He's not chewing on my desk. He started it the first day he was here. I quickly disabused him of it. But I said to him, and he understood in his dog-like way, is that you can have the slippers, and so he has the slippers.
It's always so nice,
slipper is it's just being annihilated right now.
It's so nice that animals, it doesn't take that much to keep them happy. Just hey, you can chew on a slipper. Oh, great! That'll keep me occupied for a few hours. It's just so good that they're not as complex as humans. You have to think of all the different ways that they can be happy. Anyway, Pete, I think we're done with our live stream. I think we've talk about a lot of the big issues of the hour. We've even addressed spiritual matters. So I guess that the dogs are not going to bother showing up. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody who has joined us. Thank you for all of your questions, always very interesting, and all your comments and ideas and so on. It's always very interesting. We learn a great deal, and we will be back. We're going to do the same thing next Monday. So until then, goodbye. We're going to do, of course, a number of podcasts over the week, but see you then. Bye-bye, Peter.
Take care.